Hi, welcome to Learn Nursing's Respiratory System Review. Let's get started. All right, well, if you're going to talk about the respiratory system, you have to start with the lungs. Now, what do you remember about the lungs? You've got 3 lobes on the right and 2 lobes on the left, right? Everybody with me? Okay, all right. It's going to be a really long session if we're not. Now, really your lung is kind of, it's air-filled and it's spongy. You want it to be spongy because we need it to be elastic and to spring back. Now, there are 300 million alveoli. That is huge. So you've got the surface area of about a football field inside your chest for air exchange. So the point of air exchange is O2 in and CO2 out. So what is the CO2, where does it come from? Why do we have so much of it in our body? Well, it's just a regular old byproduct of metabolism. So there's always a ready supply of CO2 in your body. Your body needs to stay in an area we call homeostasis. Now, if you've studied ABGs, you know that homeostasis, as far as that is concerned, is a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. That is what homeostasis is. If my O2 gets off, a high or low, or my CO2 gets off, I can end up throwing off that balance. And what we're going to talk about is how does our body keep that balance? Now, most of you have you've traced a red blood cell through the heart, right? See if you can do the same thing with an air molecule of oxygen going from your nose and down to the alveoli. You breathe it in through your mouth and nose. It goes past your trachea and your windpipe with the epiglottis flap. Remember how when you eat with your grandma and she chokes, what does she say? Went down the wrong pipe, doesn't she? Well, that's what your epiglottis helps the air go down the trachea and the food go down the epiglottis, down the esophagus. So you have breathing through your mouth and nose. It goes past your trachea and your windpipe, and it goes through the bronchi, down to the bronchial tubes, and down to the alveoli, where we have these capillaries where the exchange really happens, right? So you start with these big things up top and go down to these little teeny tiny capillaries way down at the bottom. Now let's look at those alveoli. They are the worker bees of the lungs. You have 2 different types in your body. Type 1 are the ones that form the cells, which people in emphysema have some trouble with that. And type 2 cells are the ones that do the surfactant. So I'll go from my nose and my mouth all the way down to the worker bees, which are the alveoli. Okay, and they're right connected to those capillaries, and that's actually where the diffusion, where the CO2 and the O2 exchange happens. Type 1 forms my walls, and type 2, surfactant. Now, what do you remember about surfactant? It's that lipid kind of substance, and it's really important. Everybody take a deep breath. That really does feel better, doesn't it? It's amazing how that works, but every time you take that big sigh, you're encouraging that surfactant to spread around, right? And why is that a good thing? Because that helps your alveoli stay open. Open alveoli are a good thing, because if it's collapsed, you don't have the oxygen and CO2 exchange. So you always want to remember, we do it naturally, whether you realize it or not. Some people do it all the time. Anyone live with someone or know someone who sighs all the time when they're irritated? Maybe it was your mother. Whatever it was, that's really not what we're talking about. But naturally, every certain number of breaths, your body naturally takes in a big, deep sigh, and that's the point. It wants to encourage that surfactant to get in there and move around and help those alveoli expand uniformly. Now, all of you are going to be fighting the urge to yawn. Now that we had you sigh really big, you're going to want to yawn. Now, when inspiration helps spread that around, and expiration is what prevents those alveoli from collapsing because of the surfactant. Now, we're going to take a look a little closer at the airway.